Hi, my talk is titled Getting Animated with SwiftUI. And if you didn't think this presentation was going to include borderline nauseating animations, you're in for a trip. Before I get started, I wanted to do a little overview. So just start out a little bit about me. My name's Ruben Martinez. I'm on Twitter at Ruben Codes. I'm a staff engineer here at OkCupid. I used to be on the web team, but then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Now I'm on the iOS team, which is really great. Joel is my manager, and he's a really great guy. So yeah, that's sort of how I ended up learning iOS, learning SwiftUI, and SwiftUI is really, really cool. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all. But I was really impressed, especially with the animation features, because that's a toolkit that the web really struggles with. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I've learned. So the biggest thing you need to know about me is that I'm a Taylor Swift fan. And that actually kind of landed me in the news recently, but that's a story for another time. So today's December 13th, which, as you may or may not know, is Taylor Swift's birthday. So happy birthday, Taylor. If you're watching the rest of this talk, please don't sue me. So today I wanted to go over building a Taylor Swift themed music player. If you want to follow along at home, you can go to bit.ly/ts-player. So we're going to talk about some animations, sort of what we get for free out of the box with the with animation modifier, what we get with some pretty simple tweaks, and what we can do with a little extra work, and talk about match geometry effect. And then finally, if we get to it, there's a bonus round where things will probably go off the rails. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to share some code. And hopefully this is readable. There we go. And I'm going to try to use this Xcode preview feature. Hopefully it works. We'll find out. So yeah, I set up this basic music player framework. So let me sort of walk you through the architecture. So we have this player app. It sets up a view model, which contains a lot of Taylor Swift songs. And looking at that view model, we have sort of what you would expect for a music player. We have information about the track that's currently playing with info like the name, artist, song length, and some artwork. And besides that, we also keep track of the current location of like the song, like how much time has elapsed, and whether we're currently playing or not. And the view model also has a timer, which just updates the current location if we're currently playing. And there's implementation details, but it's not super duper important because today we're here to talk about animations. So let's get into the basic. The basic view is the first thing I want to show you guys today. And this is a view without any animations. So what we have here is a reference to the player view model. And as you can see in the view body, we're just rendering some album art and track info. And what that looks like, it's pretty straightforward. We're rendering the title, some playback controls, and the progress. So you can sort of see that here on the right. And each of these are sort of little views within this same basic view. Again, we're rendering the artist name, this little scrubber view, not terribly interesting, the current time and the time remaining, and the playback controls, which has the back and forward and play buttons. So what you would expect in a music app. But to get animated, we have this toggleable view. And this is very similar to what we were just looking at. The big difference is that we have some state. And the state is whether we are in an expanded mode or not. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to switch this flag to be true. And hopefully this preview will update. Yeah, so this is the expanded mode. So what are we doing here? So looking at the changes to the view body, we're sort of moving this album art to be more centered in the top part of the view. We are changing how we're rendering or where we're rendering the title. We have this new title vertical view, which the only difference between title vertical and title horizontal is just B stack versus H stack. So pretty straightforward. And again, a few other tweaks here and there. We are conditionally rendering the current time and remaining time either above or sorry, either below or alongside the scrubber. And we're changing the size of our playback controls to be these bigger buttons. So nothing is animated yet. So we're going to start out by adding a view modifier here called on tap gesture. And all we're going to do here is toggle the is expanded state. Cool. So now I can tap on this view and see it toggle between the two. Again, no animations here yet. So when I talk about what we get for free, there's a really cool with animation function. And again, I'm not really changing anything about the rest of my code. I'm just wrapping this call in with animation. And now you sort of see this crossfade, which actually looks pretty nice. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't be ashamed to ship that. It's not beautiful, but it's all right. So what else can we do? Let's say that I want to scale up this artwork. There's a scale effect modifier. I can say if we're in the expanded state, let's zoom this up to 1.1, otherwise 0.9. See what that looks like. So now you see it grow and shrink. Looks pretty nice. There's also a really cool rotation 3D effect. I always forget the syntax for this, but I can say and now I want to rotate this along the z-axis, so I'm going to say 0, 0, 1. I think it's Z. We'll find out. Oh, so that's interesting. Let's try the y-axis. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that you can get for free. Like very minimal effort to add these really nice animations. Say I want to add a shadow. I'll do that here. And yeah, now it sort of looks like it's elevating as it animates, which is nice. Cool. So that's with what you can get with animation. Like all I did was wrap that call. But there's something really cool that I learned about in these last few months called a match geometry effect, and it lets us get even more advanced. So match geometry effect looks like, where's one? This. So it's a view modifier that we add. We give it an ID for a view and a namespace. And what's cool is you'll see here I have this title vertical and title horizontal. I'm using the same ID for the track name here as I do over here. Same thing for the artist. The view ID is the same. And I do this in a couple other places. I have one for the scrubber location, the scrubber itself, and the time remaining. And then there's also match geometry effects for each of the buttons. So now with the match geometry effect added, we get a little more than just the old crossfade. So this is actually moving the old view from a position to a new position. It's actually resizing each of those elements. And so it looks a lot nicer. And all I had to do was add this match geometry effect modifier that sort of lets SwiftUI know which view is which, so that both in the before state and the after state, we're able to map one thing to another. Okay, so all that's really fun. But one of the questions I had when I was sort of learning all these cool things was like, okay, what if I want to get a little more complicated? What if I don't just want to scale something up? What if I want to do a pulse animation, for example, where something grows and then shrinks? How do I do that? And I haven't found a really great answer. So if anyone knows better than I do, please let me know. But I did stumble upon some code written by Antoine van der Lee called an animation completion modifier, animation completion observer modifier. And what that lets you do is sort of figure out when an animation is finished, and then you can sort of do whatever you want. So I changed it up a little bit. I saw that code, it's great. Definitely recommend checking out their website. But I changed it up a little bit so that what we're doing in this modifier is we're taking some value and then we're also passing this a binding to a new value. So we're able to see when I animate a value, we're able to get updates as the value changes. So in the examples that we've looked at so far, that might be this artwork starting out at 0.9 scaled and going up to 1.1. So we're actually now able to observe that value as it changes, which is perhaps not immediately obvious how that's useful, but we'll see in just a sec. So then I got a little mathy, and I said, I thought of it in terms of a line. So far we've seen values go from 0 to 1, or you can think 0.9 to 1.1, whatever the case may be. So how can I make a function that goes up and then goes down? For those of you that don't remember math class, I ended up with an absolute value function that looks something like this. So in my case, I wanted to make a view that would start out scaled at 0.1, at 1.0, grow to 1.5, and then grow back to 1.0. And I don't remember what this code is off the top of my head, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I tried to add this effect to the back and forward buttons. And you can see what that looks like. So you see it grows and then it shrinks. And the code for that looks like this. We create a new piece of state. I called it isAnimatingPrev. And I basically said when that is true, we want to be at 1. When it's false, we want to be at 0. And then I created this piece of state, which is just a CG float. So that lets us sort of track that 0 to 1 value as it changes. And finally, I added this scale effect modifier where I'm passing this same function that we saw here, 1.5 minus x minus 0.5. Translated into SwiftUI code, looks about the same. But yeah, this prev animation state is a value that changes from 0 to 1, and then I do some math on it, and we get to see that value go from 1 to 1.5 back down to 1. And then at the end, there's this completion handler, and I just reset my state. But what's cool about that animation observer is you can imagine that once this animation is completed, I could, if I wanted to, trigger a new animation. And that's how you can start to build some really, really complex stuff, if you so choose. So for example, I might make this animation scale up and then fly off screen. I won't do that right now, but I could. And let your imagination run wild. Yeah, I've really enjoyed making these super delightful, simple animations that create a fun user experience. I mean, I think that's why a lot of us got into app development in the first place, right? Because we use these delightful apps. But sometimes it's hard to make time to have fun while you're working. And SwiftUI makes it really easy and really painless. So yeah, I hope this encourages those of you here to have some fun with it, And that's all I got.
Thank you, Ruben. Do you have time for a question or two? All right. So for questions from the audience, just go ahead and raise your hand. For questions from Zoom, I will ask Joel to maybe relay them if he could. And I can start with a question. Did you show us anything that is like new for iOS 16 only, or will all the things you showed us work in older SwiftUI versions?
I'm pretty sure, yep. I'm pretty sure, yeah, most of that should work going back at least a few SwiftUI versions, as far as I'm aware.
Cool. Question back here? Yes, no? Question? Yes. All right.
Oh, me now. I have a question. Hi, Mike. That was a very great talk. I have a question about the animation observer. Is animating preview being set to false in the completion? Is that like a flag that disables animation or disables user interaction? Could you talk a little bit more about why that setting that to false is necessary in the observer?
Yeah, totally. So in this animation observer, I'm looking at this value that will go from 0 to 1 when this is animation prev is set to true. So I totally glossed over talking about this. But when the button is clicked, I'm setting that is animation prev value to true. So naturally, the next time I click the button, I'll want it to be false so I can get that 0 to 1 effect again. So that's why I set it to false once the animation is done.
Any questions from Zoom? Nope. Any questions from the room? Going once, going twice. All right. Thanks again, Ruben.
Hello. My name is Dean. I'm an iOS engineer at Peloton. Yeah, I'm very interested in wearables and live experiences. And I actually met my wife through OkCupid. So thank you all very much for that. Yeah, it's great. So a little disclaimer here. This talk is using the Xcode 14.2 RC and a feature that is actively being updated. This information may be outdated if you're coming at it in the future or even the next day, but I'm trying to make the information here as useful as it can be, but who knows what will happen in the future. So in our agenda today, we will talk a little bit about what live activities are, what can you do with them, and then we're gonna walk through some demo code and add some to it. So what are live activities? Live activities are a cross between a widget and a push notification. Live activities are typically seen in some sort of context. So for example, like a timer, a live sports game, or a flight. And with iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, I'm sure you've seen there's a new dynamic island that you can put your content around. And yeah, this is all part of the live activity feature set. If you support live activities, you also support Dynamic Island. But what are live activities really? They are SwiftUI views provided to the widget extension, and they are launched through the main app, and they receive a payload of data to render. And that data can be updated through the main app as it runs in the background. And you can even update this data remotely with push notifications. And they can share information from the main app, like through the keychain and through user defaults, through app groups. Similar to widgets, you cannot use buttons interactively in them. However, through the power of deep links, you can provide a similar experience in a graceful way. Your user can tap a link, and that link will tell it where to go. And then your app opens and you can perform the operation as specified by that deep link. So if you see a dynamic island with a little button in it, that's what that is. It's a link. And what about Dynamic Island? So as I said, it lives alongside the camera housing, and it leverages the same payload as live activities. So when you send the request to the operating system to start the live activity, that same information will get sent to the Dynamic Island. Also, shout out to Flighty, which really is the best part of traveling right now. Fantastic little app to help you keep track of your flights. Unlike live activities, though, the Dynamic Island has a little bit of a divided canvas. So this may look intimidating, but rest assured that this is actually very flexible. Leveraging the leading and trailing sections, you can get really snug against the camera housing. So for example, for Flighty, like looking at the seat number and the actual flight, it's really nice for getting your content up there. And then when you do need long pieces of horizontal space, you can use that bottom section, and it's really not that bad to work with. So how do you build a live activity? So first you define your activity attributes, which is the data that you may need. That's the payload. You build an activity configuration in the widget extension, and that's the configuration for actually providing the SwiftUI view. And then once you're in the main app, you call activity.request to launch it. So Apple released this food truck app to demonstrate all these great features in iOS 16. And it really is a fantastic way to get accommodated with all these new things that we have. So I highly recommend checking it out. But it's all about a food truck, and I think it's kind of missing a feature. So if we can kind of pretend we're working at this food truck. So this is the live activity that they have. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Chef, but like Chef, in it you can see it's a very high stress environment. Saving a single click or tap rather would be a very big savings to this company. So if we can make it so that from the live activity, they can complete orders from the lock screen, we'll probably save a lot of money. So let's take this old live activity and add some functionality to it, such as a button to allow folks to automatically complete their orders. So again, with the new, we're going to take that existing view and we're going to add a little link to it, and that will automatically complete it. And we'll do that in the live activity, but maybe we'll also be able to do that in the dynamic island. So let me just change the view real quick. Also, I now realized I have to have two hands. How did you do that? That was really impressive. Okay. So here we go. So let's start by taking a look at the existing app and that code that I was all talking about. So if we start with the activity attributes. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you. So this is that payload that I was talking about. This you define in your app and you share it between your app and your widgets. And this is the data that your widget will, your live activity will receive in order to render itself, and that the app will construct so that the activity can, do something. In the iOS app, we have this prepare order function. If I haven't explained this properly, this is an app for the folks who are working in this food truck to start preparing an order. So this is what will happen when they start, letting the customers know that their order is underway. And you can see right here, we construct that content state, that activity attributes. And down here, we request that the system produce it. So let's do a little quick build and run. Here's our app. Here's our order. And there it is. There's a live activity. And yeah, you can see it needs a little something. If I'm in a high pressure situation, I got to tap, and then I got to tap up here. I got to drop my phone, So we're gonna fix that. So here is our widget configuration. This lives inside our widget target, or widget extension. And here is the closure that will be returned for our live activity. And down here is our closure for our dynamic island. And you can see in here, it's not just the dynamic island view, but also the leading and trailing for when you have the content in its minimized state. So like there, so we have leading and trailing in those compact spaces. And then there's minimal, which is the tiny detached one when there's multiple activities running. But we want to update our live activities. So let's go here and look, someone already commented. Yeah, this logo is a little bit too large. It's not really giving us anything. So let's get rid of that. Let's update this to, oh, someone already said that. Yeah, capsule link view. Let's go with that. And so what we did here is we just updated that order info view so that we could move the timer to the left so that we had all that space for that button. You might notice here we have this weird text. This isn't like a normal text SwiftUI view. This is a kind that takes a time range. And what will happen here is because you're not really, you can't directly interact with these. You can't like update this with a timer. You just tell SwiftUI, hey, count from here to here and count up or down. And that's how you handle timers. So that's what you're going to do for that. And it's very similar if you ever work with Apple Watch. There's a very similar element there. Now we need to update our time range. And let's go. Oh, we're missing a parameter. This is the view for our dynamic island. We got to update that too. Because they're both in the same target, they can share code. It's really nice. And so here we go. We're running. And we go to launch. And nothing's there. So the Apple documentation does a really good job of getting you to this point. But if you get here and nothing launches, what do you do? So let's start to debug this. So one first thing that I would like to do is I'd like to make sure that this view is even loading. So one way to do that would be to put something in the on appear, but even on appear kind of assumes that we're getting to that point. So I want to start even earlier than that. So one thing that's very helpful is, using a print statement. For this, the kind of development, the console doesn't really reliably connect between the device and the console, and it doesn't do that for simulator as well. However, the OS logger is fantastic for this purpose. So we can make a little logger for ourselves over here and give ourselves a good subsystem, and then add a little log statement right in here. And then now that we've done that, we can change this activity configuration to our little hook right here and get rid of these because we're using that nice trailing closure syntax. And here we go. So we're gonna run this again and see what happens. So it did load. So we know that we're getting there. We know that a widget is loading. We're going to see that again when we actually do that. Yeah, we're getting a widget loading. It's just something's going wrong. So at this point, what I would normally do is I would check the crash logs. You can find your crash logs at in the settings, or if you go to Xcode in the device and simulator panel. I don't know if any of you saw, but I think we don't even need to check the crash logs, because if you check out that console or capsule view that we added, I think there's an error in there. So yeah, this is not going to work for us right here. So we need to update this. So here we go. This is where the magic is happening. So here we use this SwiftUI link element in order to deep link into a completed route. And we actually paint the view. So it looks all nice. And there we go. There's our actual completed view. However, if we check back at our console, so if we click this, okay, if we click that, it opens up the view. We expect that because that's what it does by default. But if we click this button, it's still not being handled. So there's still a problem here. One thing I want to point out is that there's actually already logs in the main app that's right here that's showing that the URL handler is being called. And when you're building this sort of extension, having a timeline that is in order like this is excellent. So I highly recommend when you face these kind of issues, use a logger, use the same subsystem on both sides, search for it, get this fantastic timeline view. It's really great. So we can see that the URL handler is being called, but not exactly doing the thing that we expect. So let's go and fix that. So just like any other place, there's a nice little comment helping us out. So we're going to just take a second to add our last little snippet. And this is going to go ahead and when we handle the URL, actually mark it as completed. So this is the SwiftUI way of doing it. You might be more familiar with the app delegate way of doing it, but this is the same concept. So here we got our view. There, the old case is still handled. And there we go. One less tap. We're making it happen. It's doing great. But if you look in our dynamic island, it still doesn't really look right. We now have 2 timers. They're counting down differently in the wrong place. That's just all wrong. So let's fix that and make it look, add the ability to complete from the dynamic island as well. But because these are all SwiftUI views in the same place, it's just as simple as finding the trailing view. So this is the SwiftUI view that is put in this trailing element over here, and updating this timer view to be our capsule link. And this should work. But Yeah. Yeah. Great. Cool. So from there, I just want to make a couple notes that the simulator is definitely usable for this sort of thing, but hardware is most reliable, which is why I did this demo off of actual hardware. If you're doing this kind of development and you're seeing your activity not appear, definitely check your crash logs. It's a little bit tough to know when to do that because again, just doing the normal build and run, you don't really get the normal Xcode console here. And just as a note, when you're architecting and designing these things, the dynamic island and the live activities share data, so they should probably share views too. Some other thoughts are that here I was only running the app extension, the app target, but there are reasons to run the widget extension target, particularly if you want to use the debugger. But if for some reason you do that and things appear out of date, just make sure you run the app target before running the widget target and everything should look great. Another thing that can happen when you are just running the widget extension is if you make updates on the app side, particularly to the activity attributes, that shared model, you might get crashes. You might get kernel invalid address, exec bad address. Again, just rebuild the main app in that case. And yeah, make sure to leverage OS Logger and Concept App when you're doing cross-process debugging. And I got some notes and references that I'll share with the slides. Any questions?
Questions for Dean? I was going to ask, like, what are some gotchas? But you went over those toward the end in your notes. Like, that was super useful. Any questions from the room? Any questions from Zoom? Yes.
Hey, awesome talk. I loved it. Questions about the time limits on live activities. Are you familiar what the time limits are? What I read is that the system will close the live activity after 8 hours. Are you familiar with that? And do you know if you get any notification like back to the app that the live activity is about to abort? The system is about to close the live activity.
Thank you for your question. I have not encountered that yet. That is frustrating because there are definitely very real use cases for having a live activity longer than 8 hours. I think you could get around that by just making a new live activity. Because again, the main app controls that. So if the main app is running, you should be able to do that. But I don't know if there is a callback that the widget would get. Generally, the data flows main app to widget and not the other way around, except for certain special cases. I know I called out Flighty earlier. I know there's flights way longer than 8 hours. I would love to hear how they handle it.
Yeah, good question. Joel, Zoom question.
Okay, so the question is from Greg on Zoom. Is there a use case for live activities that you haven't seen yet?
Hey, Greg, what up? Thank you for your question. I don't know. I guess if I knew, then everyone else would. But I think it'd be really fun to do some kind of like geocaching or some like Pokemon Go sort of experience with live activities, because again, it enables like very close to the user and very seamless interaction, and they could definitely leverage links like that and make a really cool experience.
Hey, so this is reminding me a lot of like the early Apple Watch development days where there were like very specific things you could do. And I'm just curious, like in your experience, is there anything that any limitations that you wish weren't there, improvements you'd like to see over time?
Yeah, I mean, normal buttons. Yeah, a lot of the stuff I got from, so I actually work on Apple Watch at Peloton, and pretty much all of the things that I presented today are things that I was like, oh, I'm working on this. This is something that I had to deal with on Apple Watch. So yeah, particularly using like OS logger. Another like really nice thing with using the operating system logger is getting sysdiagnose and being able to tell your QA person, oh, get me a sysdiagnose log and have it, you know, being able to reconstruct a timeline. Yeah, this I wish I could do buttons.
Hello, great talk. I was wondering, you mentioned you could potentially update live activities with push notifications. I was wondering if you've kind of experimented with that. Also knowing that push notifications per Apple's documentation is not always guaranteed, but you know, it's generally there.
Yeah, that's again a use case that I haven't particularly had, but they document, and it seems like a thing that, you know, I again referencing other apps that have more of a case for this, like Flighty, like they probably use push notifications to update their app. But yeah, I haven't had any particular cases for it myself, so I can't really speak to that.
All right, any more questions? Looks like no. Yes.
Do you have any experience with the kind of more imperative API for dynamic island activities, like non-SwiftUI?
I'm unaware if there is a way to like imperatively build your dynamic island, and like, I mean, I guess you could wrap it, but I'm not unclear about that, or if it supports that, because I know there are certain things, like there are certain animation callbacks, and button itself doesn't really, you know, you can use the on change handler, but like it's not gonna get called. So I'd imagine there'd be some similar limitations for wrapping and imperative view.